girls, and welcome back to our Little Leader series. You're in Mrs. Cooper's Cozy Corner, and we are going to learn about two exceptional people from African American history. So don't forget that February is Black History Month, and we celebrate African American culture and exceptional people from African American history. So, some of these people I know that you haven't heard about before. So, that's the reason I decided to do this was to expose you to some different people. So, the first person we have today is Marian Anderson, and she was 1897 to 1993, and she was an opera singer. So she was actually still alive when Mrs. Cooper was alive. I was born in 1990, so Marian Anderson, she was an opera singer. With a nickname like Baby Contralto, Marian always had a future in opera. She started singing with the church choir in her hometown of Philadelphia when she was only 6 years old. The congregation wanted to help cultivate Marian's natural talent, so they raised funds to get her voice lessons. By the 1930s, Marian was performing at big venues and famous institutions in the United States and Europe, often as the first woman or African American to do so. In 1935, she was invited to the White House to sing for President and First Lady Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. She was the first African American to receive such an honor. This, however, did not stop discrimination from affecting her career. In 1939, she was barred from performing at Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C. When Eleanor Roosevelt found out, she invited Marian to sing at the Lincoln Memorial on Easter Sunday. Marian sang in front of a crowd of 75,000 people and was broadcast live across the United States to millions by radio. Marian stayed in the national spotlight for many more years. In 1955, she became the first African American to perform with the New York Metropolitan Opera. She delivered the national anthem at President John F. Kennedy's inauguration. He later awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom. She participated in the Civil Rights Movement and sang at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963. Marian was a trailblazer and a leader in her field with a long respected career. With her voice, she reached people all around the world, and when faced with adversity, she rose above it. And that is Marian. Cool. Marian Anderson. Awesome. Our second person today is James Baldwin, and he's 1924 to 1987, and James was a writer and an activist. So that's James Baldwin. When he was 14, James thought he would become a minister like his stepfather. James was already a great orator, giving sermons in front of congregations. However, he felt frustrated with the church. Around that time, James realized he was gay. The systemic racism and homophobia coming from an institution that was supposed to share messages of grace and love made him feel lost, disappointed, and alone. James left the church and focused on developing his writing skills. For a while, he worked odd jobs and was mentored by writers like Richard Wright and County Collin. Eventually, James felt suffocated by racism and left the country. In 1948, he went to Paris, where he could live and work without fear. In 1953, he published his first novel, Go Tell It on the Mountain, inspired by his experiences with religion, class, and exile. In the United States, the civil rights movement was blossoming, and James wanted to participate. During this period, his writing focused on what it meant to be Black in America. James felt that segregation was the biggest source of strife in the country and that racism hurt white society as well as Black. He called for human equality and encouraged brotherhood over violence. At times, he was criticized for his pacifism, but James never had hatred for any people, only for the establishment and institutions that told people what to do. He became well known for articulating arguments in an elegant way that made Black and white audiences listen. He traveled the country, giving speeches and lectures, and he debated and befriended some of the biggest leaders of the day. Many of James's essays, poems, and novels are considered masterpieces, including Notes of a Native Son and The Fire Next Time. He wrote openly about his sexuality at a time when no one else did. For all his work and his words, James was watched closely by the FBI, perhaps because the agency knew the power he had to galvanize the people around him with his sharp and bold messages. So, who was another person that often talked about brotherhood and having human equality and using peace instead of violence? And that was Martin Luther King. So, he had a lot of similarities to Martin Luther King, and that is James Baldwin. So, those are our two exceptional, extraordinary people from African American history for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.